And it leads to the next question, because a few people on the lines are asking, do you believe in God?
I'm not convinced. If here's the thing. If every time I talk about God with someone who's a believer, God is all powerful and all knowing and all good, right? The good is a big part of this. Mm-hmm. And then I look at all the ways Earth wants to kill us.
Strangle us.
You know, a tsunami takes out 250,000 people, hurricanes, earthquakes, tornadoes, floods. And I add all of that up. Either the God is not all powerful or is not all good. But it can't really be both, given all the ways the universe wants to kill us. And if Earth is not finished killing you, there's the asteroid that could come in.
Right.
An asteroid rendered 70% of all life forms extinct back in the famous one in 65 million years ago that took out the dinosaurs. So there's so many ways to die, not at the hands of someone else who has free will, that I don't know what is the nature of the God that you're talking about.
I gotta try to use your logic back at you, but don't we define what is good and what is bad? So we see a tsunami wipe out a whole bunch of people, and we're as human beings going, wow, that's bad, because we define what bad is. Maybe in God's brain, eyes, whatever the hell, that's not bad.
Well, but except you defined what God is.
Oh boy.
Wow.
Now you did it.
That's
so why do you have the power to define who and what God is,
right,
but not have the power to define what good is?
Yeah, my point is we just don't know it all. Not even close.
Oh, sure. So therefore, if you're going to say God actually is good, and 250,000 people dying from an earthquake and a tsunami and other natural disasters, right, and God presumably has control over that, and God is good, then we have to then say God works in mysterious ways, right?
So there you go.
That's that. But people only say that when their understanding of God fails them.
When
right?
it's something bad.
No, when they can't understand it, they say, well, God works in mysterious ways.
Right,
but
yeah.
somehow, in these other ways, you did understand him.
Right.
How are you saying, well, this is the handiwork of God? You're doing God's work. God wants you to do this. Somehow you know God's motives every other way. Mm-hmm. But when 250,000 people get wiped out, God works in mysterious ways. Mm-hmm. Why do you even claim to have access to God's mind in some contexts and not others?
Exactly.
Just admit you have no clue,
right,
and get on with life. That's how I look at it.
We just don't have a clue when it comes down to it.
Well, I'd like to think that preserving health and longevity, that is a nice operational definition of something that's good.
Right.
How can you argue? How can you debate something that keeps you alive and healthy? That's got to be something that's good. I can't. I refuse to allow someone to say, "I'm going to give you cancer, birth defects, and shorten your life," and somehow call that good. I'm not going there.
I hear you.
I'm not going there.
Yeah, well, I think it's those big questions. Theoretical physicists seem to come up against those throughout their entire careers.
That's why I became a theoretical physicist. I wanted to bump up against those big questions.
Constantly. And so, that's another question I was really interested in, is that I've heard that the majority of theoretical physicists are incredibly spiritual and have a great appreciation for the concept of consciousness and the soul and the universe and where it came from, because these are the questions that they're constantly asking. For yourself, how do you, what's your view on life, and where is it? What are we doing when we teleport life, if we ever get to that point?
Well, if I knew the answer to life, I would have an inside track up there.
Right. As would anybody, yeah.
But let me tell you how we physicists view things, right? For example, Einstein was asked the big question, is there a God? Is there a meaning to everything, right?
Right.
And here's how Einstein answered the question. He said, there really are two kinds of gods. We have to be very scientific. We have to define what you mean by God. If God is the God of intervention, the personal God, the God of prayer, the God that parts the waters, then he had a hard time believing in that. Would God listen to all our prayers for a bicycle for Christmas and smite the Philistines for me, please?
Right.
He didn't think so. However, he believed in the God of order, harmony, beauty, simplicity, and elegance, the God of Spinoza, That's the God that he believed in, because he thought the universe was so gorgeous. It didn't have to be that way. It could have been chaotic. It could have been ugly, messy. But here we have the fact that all the equations of physics can be placed on a simple sheet of paper.
Right.
Einstein's equation is only 1 inch long. And the quantum theory is about a yard long, but you can squeeze it onto a sheet of paper.
Right, with a small enough font. No.
Right? And with string theory, you could even put those two equations together. And string theory can be squeezed into an equation 1 inch long. And that equation, by the way, is my equation. That's string field theory. That's my contribution.
Right.
But we want to know, well, where did that equation come from? You know, this is what Einstein asked. Did God have a choice? Was there any choice in building a universe? When he woke up in the morning, he would say, I'm going to create a universe. I'm going to be God today. What kind of universe would I create? This is how he created much of his theories.
That scared them, because they interpret that to mean, then if this is it, there's nothing else. No God and no life after.
For religious people, many people say, well, God is within you, or God, there are ways that people have shaped this, rather than God as an old gray-bearded man in the clouds. So if God is within you, what I'm sure Carl would say, in your mind, and we can measure the neurosynaptic firings when you have a religious experience. We can tell you where that's happening, when it's happening, what you're feeling like at the time. So your mind, of course, is still within the cosmos.
But do you have any sympathy for people who seem to only feel safe in the vastness of the universe you describe in your show, if they can infer a personal God who makes it more hospitable to them, who cares for them?
In this, what we tell ourselves is a free country, which means you should have freedom of thought. I don't care what you think. I just don't. Go think whatever you want. Go ahead. Think that there's 1 God, 2 gods, 10 gods, or no gods. That is what it means to live in a free country. The problem arises is if you have a religious philosophy that is not based in objective realities that you then want to put in the science classroom. Then I'm going to stand there and say, no, I'm not going to allow you in the science classroom. I'm not telling you what to think. I'm just telling you in the science class, you're not doing science. This is not science. Keep it out. That's when I stand up. Otherwise, go ahead. I'm not telling you how to think.
I think you must realize that some people are going to go to your show at the planetarium and they're going to say, aha, those scientists have discovered God. Because God, dark matter, is what holds this universe together.
So is that a question?
It's a statement. You know they're going to say that.
So the history of discovery, particularly cosmic discovery, but discovery in general, scientific discovery, is one where at any given moment there's a frontier. And there tends to be an urge for people, especially religious people, to assert that across that boundary into the unknown lies the handiwork of God. This shows up a lot. Newton even said it. He had his laws of gravity and motion, and he was explaining the moon and the planet. He was there. He doesn't mention God for any of that. And then he gets to the limits of what his equations can calculate. So can't quite figure this out. Maybe God steps in and makes it right every now and then. That's where he invoked God. And Ptolemy, he bet on the wrong horse, but he was a brilliant guy. He formulated the geocentric universe with Earth in the middle. This is where we got epicycles and the machinations of the heavens. There was still a mystery to him. He looked up and uttered the following words: when I trace at my pleasure the windings to and fro of the heavenly bodies. These are the planets going through retrograde and back. The mysteries of the earth. When I trace at my pleasure the windings to and fro of the heavenly bodies, I no longer touch earth with my feet. I stand in the presence of Zeus himself and take my fill of ambrosia. What he did was he didn't invoke Zeus to account for the rock that he's standing on or the air he's breathing. It was this point of mystery, and in gets invoked God. This, over time, has been described by philosophers as the God of the gaps. Mm-hmm. If that's where you're going to put your God in this world,
to hear the speaker myself. On one side, we have my esteemed colleagues who are 100% certain that the universe is pointless, meaningless, and there is no God. On the other side, we have another group that is 100% certain the universe has a point, has a meaning, and there is a God. One side's right, one side's wrong, right? My personal point of view is they're both wrong. What is science? Science is based on decidable statements. If I drop my cell phone, I know it's decidable that it will fall under gravity. Science is based on statements that you can test, reproducible, decidable, falsifiable. But the question of does God exist, does the universe have a point, is undecidable. It is not part of science. It's like trying to disprove a unicorn. Let's say you want to disprove the existence of unicorns. It's really hard to do because maybe some island, maybe in outer space, there are unicorns. How do you prove that unicorns do not exist? Very difficult. Now, I'm a physicist. My goal in life is to complete Einstein's dream of an equation, perhaps no more than 1 inch long, that will summarize all physical knowledge and allow us to, quote, read the mind of God. So what was his point of view toward God? Einstein said there really are two types of God, and that's the source of confusion. The first God is the personal God, the God of vengeance, the God that smites the Philistines, the God that answers your prayers, the God of Moses and Isaac and Jacob. Einstein said he couldn't believe in that God, but there's a second God, the God of Spinoza, Leibniz, the God of harmony, beauty, simplicity, elegance, that the universe could not have been an accident. So I see no evidence of God. However, that doesn't mean that there is no existence, there's no meaning. That doesn't mean there's not a purpose or a God out there. I just can't see it in the equations of physics. So in string theory, which is what I do for a living, we think we have a candidate for the theory of everything, the theory that eluded Einstein. And so we even now have a candidate for the mind of God. In string theory, because everything is based on vibrating strings.
Time out.
The candidate for the mind of God would be, oh, time's up.
Michio, just
The
last word,
candidate for
please.
the mind of God would be cosmic music, resonating through 11-dimensional hyperspace. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.